telling people what to do and converting them. Although before coming in the temple, one day I got very inspired by an event that Krishna manifested for me, and I tried to take one person with me. He had a car, and I went everywhere telling people that you have to learn one thing, is that Krishna is the absolute truth. So I had a little conviction before moving in the temple that Krishna is the absolute truth. But still, I didn't identify with the Hare Krishna movement. I knew about Srila Prabhupada a little bit. But I really felt absolutely necessary to be in the Vaishnava atmosphere. But Krishna had another plan. As mentioned, Rupanuga Prabhu was there, although he didn't recruit me, but he was the one who captured me. I jumped in the net myself and wanted to jump out. And he pulled the string, and utilizing very clever means, a few steps at a time, it was my first time captured, very happily. So the second book, Reluctant Disciple, it was proposed to me within about a few months of being within the center that it was standard in ISKCON to take initiation from Srila Prabhupada after about 6 months. First initiation and second initiation after about a year. So I kept quiet my own perception of Srila Prabhupada. Before ISKCON, I knew about him. When he would return to India in '67, I was there, and my very best Vaishnava friend told me, oh, he's a very good Swami. But for one reason or another, I came very close to meeting him, like inches away. I was there at the Boston Pier when he arrived, waiting for him, but I never made it to the pier. I actually wanted to go to the pier. But then, when I began to read Srila Prabhupada's books, we didn't talk much about Srila Prabhupada at that time. We only had one 8mm reel of him preaching, and we had 2 of those old style reel-to-reel tapes of him talking. There was no ministry, nothing. So what was presented to me in his writings was this unfathomably special personality in the ranks of, and I always am reluctant to say this because Srila Prabhupada is sitting and he may take his cane and thrash me, but in the ranks of Madhavacharya. So Srila Prabhupada doesn't like to be praised. He's very humble. But he is due that praise. I encountered a number of situations in which Srila Prabhupada was encountering himself and very mystified how he had done the various things he had done. So when it was proposed to me to be initiated, by Rupanuga Prabhu, I didn't know what to tell him, because whichever way I took it, which were 2 different directions, one very truthful and one semi-truthful, it wouldn't go well. The truthful was that I felt that after hearing Srila Prabhupada waited 11 years to become initiated. Does everybody know this?
Yes.
So here is the person who was more than immensely Krishna conscious every second of his life from the time he entered, put his feet on this material world. And he waited, he felt himself that he should wait 11 years. So I thought, okay, Acharya, he waited 11 years. I have about 37 years more life expectancy, maybe 35. So I'll wait 33 years, but then by that time, Prabhupada's disciples or disciples of his disciples would be giving initiation. And so my calculation was that after 33 years, I still wouldn't be worthy of taking initiation from Prabhupada's grand disciples or great-grand disciples, because this is a very big thing, to give the word that eternally one will, remain nicely following Krishna consciousness. So I gave a little hint of that to Rupanuga, but I left out the part that I was going to wait till Rupanuga's disciples had disciples, because Rupanuga would not have tolerated me saying that I wanted to take initiation from him or his disciples, because he is Rupanuga, better called Prabhupada-nuga. He's very staunch, It is very wrong in the presence of the spiritual master to be thinking that I will give initiation. If the Guru orders, then we do. We give siksha on the order of Guru. So first I want to offer my obeisances to everyone. You're all Vaishnavas, and I'm simply an aspiring Vaishnava. Somehow I'm Prabhupada's disciple. Someone was telling me, because there's some fray going on someplace between two different preaching centers, and the person who's intermediary was telling me how one GBC was, in a GBC meeting and a temple president meeting, and this GBC, the person I'm talking about is a second generation disciple. He was around in Prabhupada's time, but didn't take initiation. He was there for a couple of years, but just didn't take initiation. So the GBC said, I don't have to listen to you. You're not Prabhupada disciple. So this is not all wrong, but 99% wrong. Not only can we avail of the Vaishnava Sangha of second, third generation, but we can come to understand how Krishna is guiding us in so many ways through so many other human souls, souls in human form and in other forms. So, but still, there's the advantage of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. So I wanted to start by speaking of an incense, which talks about how we understand our worthiness, our certification to speak on Krishna's behalf, to act on Guru's behalf. This is 1974 in Delhi, and an ongoing discussion, meetings, dialogue was there between myself and Srila Prabhupada and his first disciple. So Srila Prabhupada's first disciple, does anybody know his name?
Isn't it Acharya Prabhakar?
Yes, Acharya Prabhakar. So Acharya Prabhakar kind of reappeared in the end of 1973 and visited Srila Prabhupada at, the Krishna Balaram temple is not yet open, but Prabhupada's quarters were ready, and Prabhupada was in his quarters. They weren't fully finished. And Acharya Prabhakar, hearing about him, Acharya Prabhakar had met me, so I told him Prabhupada was coming. So they met, and then Prabhupada introduced us, and later on we were having a little trouble at our Delhi center, people coming, going, not very serious, creating politics. So the rent was higher, and Prabhupada thinking, okay, maybe we can reduce the rent and get Acharya Prabhakar's help, was having me liaison with Acharya Prabhakar. Prabhupada wrote this letter you know, I am introducing my man in Delhi, my man. I was very happy to be his man in Delhi. It was a nice thing to be called his man in Delhi. But Acharya Prabhakar already knew me, but Prabhupada was starting the relationship. And on my visit in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada was recounting his relationship with Acharya Prabhakar. He told me several things, one of which was that Acharya Prabhakar, perhaps in Prabhupada's words, was the greatest living scholar of Sanskrit. And actually Acharya Prabhakar, he fairly recently passed, and he definitely was a Vaishnava, but he was made the Acharya of the Shankar Math, even though he's not a Shankarite, because of his excellence in Sanskrit. So that was the first part of this statement. And then the second part, Srila Prabhupada told me how he lived alone in a room with Acharya Prabhakar, I think it's some 2.5 years, and day and night they would converse in Sanskrit. So if you put 2 and 2 together, that although Srila Prabhupada actually was a neophyte at that time in Sanskrit, but by Krishna's grace became so expert that he could have fluid conversations with the greatest Sanskrit scholar. So I caught him. You know, Prabhupada is not very, you know, sometimes, you know, when it came to it, he would be, you know, tout his ranks, but generally he took the humble position. So I analyzed the situation that Prabhupada wanted me to have a joint center with him, but then Acharya Prabhupada had said something else. He said, you know, his hippie-like hairs and, you know, so many things. Also, he said that he was not so happy with Acharya Prabhakar and his following. But I thought, well, how to do this, you know, because I'm going to wind up with a person who can outrun me in Vedic talk like anything. And for Indians present, don't mind it. Wherever we are, there's a bodily concept. So here is an Indian, the highest scholarly thing, and I'm going to have to be setting him in his place. So Prabhupada made it really clear, you know. But so I was thinking, how do you do both? How do you cooperate with him? Because Prabhupada wanted me to engage him, but yet not let him create havoc. So we had set up Srila Prabhupada had pioneered a novel center in Delhi, which he actually wanted to have similar in Los Angeles, but without any, it's not a political statement, but they did not follow what he said. What he wanted in Los Angeles was to keep the building exactly as it was, with the stained glass windows, exactly as a church, with the pews and with a lectern in the front, so that people, you know, Western persons who, you know, they might, and even now, you know, there are certain percentages that go the yoga route and the New Agey route, they like to sit down, but you see in their houses they sit on chairs, and most people bring shoes in to their church. So Prabhupada wanted to accommodate them and, you know, maybe have a little kirtan, but to preach. And for the devotees in the back, where the fake museum is, whoever been in Los Angeles, there was the separate temple for the devotees, inner sanctum kind of temple, as is there in the Roman Catholic diocese. They have an inner sanctum temple for the priests and the nuns, and they have liturgies that are on a higher level than is for the common person. So Prabhupada did a similar thing in Delhi, because it was a very fancy neighborhood, all millionaires and second-tier embassy staff. So we were already having visitors, and so we were going to have a rug and all around bookcases. Prabhupada's so clever. He said, why keep storage? We can have bookcases all around and store the books, and it will look like we have thousands of volumes of books. You know, so people will think, "Whoa, he's written so many books." You know, So Prabhupada was always calculating the effects. and chairs and a podium and a lectern and like that. So I started programs, and I thought, well, how to engage Acharya Prabhakar? And I took the reference of how we had our Pandal programs, where Prabhupada we would invite some leading personalities, sometimes an ambassador, sometimes a minister, sometimes a mayor, sometimes a learned person, and they would give a talk. We would give them a hint what to speak about. Sometimes they would go here and there. And then one of Prabhupada's disciples would speak, because to bridge the topic of Prabhupada, what his going to be, and what the speaker, the introductory speaker. So I spoke to Acharya Prabhakar because he's very famous. I thought maybe I could get some crowd and interesting, and I put him as the person to introduce me. So Srila Prabhupada he visited Delhi very, very often. He visited 17 times. One time, 22 days he stayed there. So for the reluctant disciple who didn't even want to see Srila Prabhupada, he turned the tables. So we were walking, and then he said, so what news? And it was on the morning walk, and I mentioned a few things, and then I brought up thinking that he would be happy that I'm moving towards cooperating with Acharya Prabhakar. Because I'm not the best at dealing with uncooperative people. I had this, if a person is mostly cooperative, I can do quite amazing things, humbly I'm saying that. But if they have it in their mind to have something, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that. So I thought, no, I'll try to be good at that. So I explained exactly, Srila Prabhupada, he introduces me, but he doesn't talk. And Prabhupada stopped, he says, what is this? He is not following with his hippie-like hair. He says, you are following little, you speak, because there will be some potency. He is not following, do not speak. And then Srila Prabhupada gave the example that in Chandni Chowk, when you enter, there's, on the left side, there's a very old temple, some 800 years old marble temple, some Shankara temple. And during Ram Leela time, they have persons come and give speeches, talks on Ram Leela. All very interesting, they're very good. They know all the little stories. Prabhupada said, they come, they listen, and they leave, but there's no effect. Then Prabhupada repeated, and I was very thankful for the modifier he used. He says, you are following little. And I was thinking, well, that's good, because at least he said little, means like I didn't want to think I'm doing very well. And therefore, when you preach, there is some effect. So this small story elaborated of how we can feel that we have authority to speak what we have heard, as far as we understand, and as much as we are following, we can speak. And then we leave the rest to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada knew very well he is not the super soul, and that within the heart, the super soul acts. But the super soul acts in response to the factor of the souls themselves, of their aspirations to purify their life and to, through the guidance of the spiritual master, to take shelter of him. And the super soul also sees how the spiritual master is giving his blessings to his disciples. So is there any aspect of Srila Prabhupada that anybody wanted me to speak on?
What happened when you spoke at the engagement? Everything went all right? Acharya and Acharya Prabhakar, he was...
Yes, but this was, I reported to Srila Prabhupada afterwards.
Okay.
Prabhupada would regularly, there are sometimes he started to grill me. Srila Prabhupada was factually my GBC, factually my temple president, and factually my temple commander. We would be sitting, we had a temple center in Totemal Lane, 19 Totemal Lane, for about a year and a half, 2 years actually, 1974 to 1976. He would come, and it was very difficult for me because Srila Prabhupada accepted a room because he wanted to stay with us. I offered him an option to stay someplace else, but he said, no, I'll stay with you. And I'm not sure if he completely knew, and I didn't completely detail what he was getting into, but we had 2 bedrooms, one of which was occupied by Srila Prabhupada, and we had 1 bathroom, which was not a terrible bathroom. It wasn't like dirty and like that, but it was the most basic bathroom you could have, just a tap and no shower and just a squat toilet. So Srila Prabhupada humbly shared that bathroom with, there were a lot of brahmacharis, showing up. Prabhupada was there and everyone would come in. So maybe 35 people he shared that bathroom with. And when he first came, there was no lock on the door, on the inside. So the carpenter was supposed to come, but he didn't. And so I had to actually lock him inside his room. That was a terrible experience and I had to sit there, with the key, so that when he wanted to come out, it was a terrible type of thing. In India, it used to be you couldn't buy any carpentry tools. The guild, the carpenters had a monopoly on the tools. You were not, it wasn't sold anywhere. I mean, I guess if you smuggled it, you could have those tools, but you could not buy them in the market. They wouldn't sell it to you unless you were in that caste. So some subject on Srila Prabhupada? Yes?
Did he speak about, like in the community, how to get devotees to not just communicate, but cooperate? Are there things about that?
Cooperation, oh yes. So the mood in my book, which is slowly or relatively rapidly coming to a finish, there's an extra section because it's quite detailed. It's called the Buffalo Days, and I go more into the detail of the way that devotees at that time felt entirely amalgamated with each other. Amalgamated meaning, and there were some practices that Rupanuga instituted, his mood himself. And then, although I'm not the most capable,
Jai Shishi Radha Radhakan Shishi Gonikai.
some ways that the devotees felt closer to each other, although we already felt close to each other. One of the ways was, even though I had no desire to have any position, temple president, this or that, so I was made temple president. And Rupanuga, because I took responsibility, that was my nature. Like, if I used to visit my friends' houses and, the lady needed help with her children, or they needed to clean the house, or they didn't have any food, I'd go on and get food and I'd cook for them. So, like servant. So it was very nice, to serve the devotees. And those devotees, they were most of them, there was one who was not, left someplace, I won't say where. But his mood was not amalgamated. He was very different. And those who followed him also kept that different mood to this day. So, enough said. So, Rupanuga asked me, he says, there's one privilege in Buffalo Temple of the temple president that you're going to be. And he said, any GBC no, there was no GBC, but later on GBC. Any sannyasi, any temple president, any secretary of Prabhupada comes, doesn't matter. You have that privilege, unilaterally. No one can take that privilege from you. So he says, what should it be? So the decision was that I had the exclusive right to serve prasadam. Oh, yeah, 5 meals a day I cooked and 4 meals I served. And you'd have to sit. In the evening, for the ladies served, because they were already in their quarters and reading Krishna book. So all those meals I would serve, and then after everyone ate, then I would eat. But that was only the beginning of service. And then we took it that, so we had temple commander, we had a Sankirtan leader, we had various persons who were responsible. And we took a practice that anybody would be able to take over the reins of the other person in an instant. There was no queue of authority. The queue was that this is my service. And so the cooperation, once that person left, we developed it very nicely, and there was nothing that anyone wouldn't do for the other. There was not a hesitation, and there was an eagerness. There was an eagerness. But no one dared ask to serve prasadam. That they didn't do. Only Sunday, There wasn't like a contest, but I would think, oh, who did something little extraordinary this week? Then they can assist me in serving prasadam. Then they would sit, and I'd make sure they ate, and then I'd go and visit all the visitors, and then I would eat. And they'd see me. I'd go in the kitchen at 4 p.m. on Sunday, work the whole night, go to Mangal Arti, go to the Bhagavatam class briefly, and then go back to the kitchen. So no sleep. And then 24 hours, then I'd serve. So the competition, if anything, was to facilitate other devotees. So we have Yogendra Vandana who just gives his whole life, but we have to have more of this, So it's not for me to comment about here, but the way, and then there were times, like Hyderabad farm, there was a very big problem, and Srila Prabhupada brought myself and Hansaduda to try to rectify the problem, and the sannyasi who was an Indian, who was in charge there and who had gotten the land promised to ISKCON, he saw everything very politically. So he saw Hansaduda, who, I don't want to criticize, but sometimes Hansaduda would get a little political. And so I think sometimes he really didn't know he was being political. But Hansaduda was not being political in Hyderabad. He was sending money, he was bringing his vans, and he wasn't trying to control anything. He was being very Hansaduda. That side of him was out. And I came and I had no interest to control anything, but Prabhupada wanted me to control. So, because things were not right. So that was the setting, and then we started to do agriculture, and Mahamsa told the workers, because I couldn't start everything alone, to catch up very fast, so we could immediately have planting on 1.5 acres. So some labor were employed, but then Mahamsa would take them away, intentionally or accidentally. So in a meeting, I brought up to Srila Prabhupada that, because we had a meeting, I said, well, Mahamsa took the labor away, he denied it. So Prabhupada, taking the opportunity, because Mahamsa didn't want to be chastised, so Prabhupada took the opportunity and laced it into me, and he said, what is this he? What is this he? It is always us. It is always we. What is this? And there are various improper words that people use like profanities. So there were maybe, I actually haven't listened to them. One of the semi-profanities, I think, that's one of, I think. So it's not that Prabhupada didn't want us to think, but when it came to Shastric conclusions, this I think, Another semi-profanity is I will try. You don't tell Srila Prabhupada I'm going to try. You don't say anything. You just go out and do it. It's like, he's master on behalf of Krishna. So Krishna is asking you, what do you say? I'll try. No. Till your dying day you try. But you don't say I'll try. You just go out and do it. But the word that was the worst in his vocabulary of profanity was bureaucracy. Oh no. So Prabhupada laced into me, he says, what is this bureaucracy? It is we. So I am, some people know that I try to be tactful, and I'm not stepping into making comments that could be politicized, which is not my intention at all. But when there's another incident which kind of highlights this bureaucracy, since I'm still addressing what you said. And we had moved our center from a very nice place, but it was overcrowded by persons who just wanted to freeload and find fault. So in the thought...
Delhi?
Delhi. So this is in 1974. We moved to a new place, and we already had Radha Parthasarati deities. And so my wife, Madhira, who was a very excellent devotee, expert at deity worship on her own, and her pal, Jamuna, who was... Madhira was actually almost as equal, in some ways better than Jamuna, but they were on a par, so that was, and I didn't want to stick my nose in it, so I worked it out what they were supposed to do, but they hadn't done it. So the singer-san was there, but the deities weren't there. So Prabhupada looked and says, mentioned. So he didn't look at anybody, he was just looking around the room, and Jamuna was there. Prabhupada knew Jamuna was there. And then, Prabhupada says, what is this? So Jamuna said, well, Prabhupada, Tejas, the temple president, and that was enough. Prabhupada says, what did he say? What's the word? Terrible word? What is this?
Bureaucracy.
Say it out loud.
Bureaucracy.
Everyone.
Bureaucracy.
Oh no, you just said a very bad word. What is this bureaucracy? I have taken so much trouble to train you.